Welcome everyone to the New York Alternative Investment Roundtable event for June 6th, 2023, entitled Nowcasting on Near-Term Artificial Intelligence, Machine Learning, Adoption Within Financial Institutions. So good afternoon, everyone. I'm Robert Akeson of the Riverside Management Group, the moderator. We are very pleased today to welcome Gary Wong, PhD of Artemis AG. Gary is an artificial intelligence and machine learning and technology advisor to major investment banks and funds, specializing in helping organizations to manage risk and gain competitive advantage through new technologies. He is also an advisor to FinTech firms on business and product developments for revenue generation. Gary is the former head trader, managing director, and head of structured trading business at Mitsubishi Securities in London, and an experienced FinTech partner with deep capital markets domain experience, focusing on artificial intelligence, machine learning, big data, and leading edge technologies for trading, quant modeling, risk management, and operational risks. He has a background in theoretical physics and a PhD from the Imperial College on the topic of high energy, nonlinear laser matter interactions. Wow, Gary, very, very impressive. And not surprisingly, folks, Gary is a fan of Star Trek. So maybe we'll get to that during our conversation. I think you're going to find Gary's perspectives to be very interesting and incisive. Clearly, artificial intelligence and machine learning influence virtually every aspect of our daily lives, from the ability to unlock a mobile phone with facial ID, to online advertisements tailored to individuals' shopping habits, to global positioning satellite programs that provide real-time alternate routes to road delays, and can't forget this one, to banking security features that can swiftly detect fraud. Despite the rapid development of these and other related innovations, many applications such as nowcasting through market pattern analysis and large language models are not delivering the financial returns investors are seeking. Research has found that more than 80% of AI projects, artificial intelligence projects, fail. Gary will discuss the artificial intelligence machine learning landscape within financial institutions and discuss the realistic expectations that investors should have for these technologies. But before we meet Gary, I do want to thank our sponsors for their ongoing support of the roundtable and this call. And as you can see up on the board here, they include Alston Bird, Baker Tilly, Deloitte, Bloomberg, New Mountain Capital, Grant Thornton, Ultimus, and our nonprofit sponsors, including Kaya, the United Kingdom Department of Trade, Fordham University Gabelli School of Business, and the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg Trade and Investment Office. Wow. Just a reminder to everyone in the audience, Gary will be answering my questions for approximately 45 to 50 minutes. However, the audience at any time through the buttons in the lower right-hand corner can always interject with their own questions, and I would encourage you to feel free to do so. All right, so let's get to it. Gary Wong, tell us
Good morning, everyone.
Good morning and welcome. Gary,
thank you.
In very high-level terms, just to sort of set the table for us, can you give us a relevant definition of what constitutes artificial intelligence, machine learning, and nowcasting?
Okay, very good. So I would, because artificial intelligence mean many things to different people. So I'm going to use a very broad definitions. Basically, artificial intelligence is just to leverage computers and machines' capability to mimic the problem solving and decision making process of the human mind. And the nowcasting is basically adjusting your forecasting with the latest information arrival to make a very near-term prediction. Example would be weather forecasting. You would be forecasting for the next week versus the tomorrow versus the next hours. So you collect the latest information for the next hour so that you can make a more accurate forecast for the next hours. So this is called nowcasting, which means that you continuously make use of the latest information arrival to adjust your forecast. Yeah. Right.
That sounds like I'm sorry, go ahead, please.
No. So I just going to say that, in fact, the artificial intelligence, if you look at the history, it was the objective and the aims of the academic community and a lot of technology companies. But here it naturally lies the problem, because at the moment, the use of words intelligence evoked a lot of subconscious association with human. But in fact, AI is a different species. So when we extrapolate, combining the capability with a lot of this, with an alien species way of thinking, we kind of project the human quality on top. It becomes very scary. So in fact, it is not really. I mean, potentially it is scary, as many commentators said. But in fact, the AI itself is just the machine and tools. We try to make use of it.
So Gary, you bring up a good point in your definition of artificial intelligence, and I'm sure everyone on the call has probably heard this, which is that, I mean, there's a great deal of commentary and probably some chatter about the impact that artificial intelligence might have on society in the longer term, and perhaps even in the shorter term. Can you comment on this? What do you think? What's the likely impact going to be on society? Is it going to take over from the humans, as people sometimes think?
Well, it is a very big question, and as many commentators has given very insightful comments on that. So what I would say is it's like a ChatGPT. I would say, sure, let me give you some examples of this. Now, but seriously, before the release of ChatGPT 3 and GPT-4, we already have a sort of many specialized tools, AI machine learning tools being used. But the difference is that it used to be requiring a large resource to make use of them, like Amazon, Netflix, and so on. You have to have a lot of resource behind it to make use of them.
Processing firepower, right?
Exactly, processing firepower. But now with the release of ChatGPT, now anyone with access to internet can do something with AI. So suddenly it becomes very near to us, and everybody seems to be able to do something with that. So that is the scary part, because it seems to be totally out of control. But what I like to point out again is that when we use AI, the intelligence color our thoughts on what it is about. It is a tool, right? So we unconsciously assign a set of human criteria for comparison. So for one of the questions, for example, performance versus competence. An example would be a ChatGPT. If you think about when we talk to each other, when I let's say did do a task very well, I perform very well, then you assume there's a competence behind it. The competence meaning that I have certain understanding and principles and a body of knowledge behind me. Whereas the ChatGPT, if you think a little bit about the actual mechanism of ChatGPT, which is called the attention mechanism, versus the how we talk. When we talk, we deploy grammar. We learn grammar from school, and
Yes.
behind the grammar is a set of principles. And you have a well-defined rules, and you have a role assigned to that. And so everything, in a way, we learn it in a consistent way. Whereas ChatGPT, the attention mechanism, is basically about is a probabilistic model to put the most appropriate word to add next to a block of text by learning
Can
lots
I
of
just jump in for a
examples.
second? So how does ChatGPT know to interject different phrases? What is the mechanism that triggers the selection of the, let's say, not just the right word, but the optimal word?
Right. Basically, it learns by going through all the examples, all the webs, texts, and Wikipedia, a lot of the things. They learn by examples. So there is no principle behind it. It really learned by example and mimic. So you have a learned rules, but they don't derive the principles behind it. So what it is that when you learn all these rules, you assign a probability for each. What is the probability for different words that should be put as the most appropriate to put the next word for the sentence?
Yes.
So as a result, it because of the huge amount of examples and the huge number of parameters. ChatGPT-3 have about 175 billion parameters, and ChatGPT-4 was rumored to have about 1 trillion parameters. They didn't disclose it, but
Wow.
the rumor is that it's about trillion parameters. So it actually, in a way, because of the learning examples, it can certainly, and the probabilistic sense of pulling the right word to follow as the next word to follow what it has said so far, it actually do a really decent job, and it actually can, because of the amount of learning examples behind it, it can pull out a lot of knowledge and unexpected sentences and so on. And it sounds to us, if it is a human, it will be like a super genius. But in fact, there's no principles behind it. So it's just putting the word that sounds good. It is a very different. It's a very different way of thinking or reasoning.
Okay. And let me ask you this. You mentioned, you use the term parameters and principles. How does it, or let me phrase the question this way, does it access these parameters or principles because it has access to all the data on the World Wide Web?
Exactly. It is a big mimic. I mean, it's like a parrot that have it have huge amount of memories and can pull out all the words at wills. And it has certain intelligence because in a probabilistic sense, it has an algorithm to calculate the most appropriate. So in a way, this is why GTP has people find it performing so well. But at the same time, people find a lot of problems with that because of inconsistency and reliability. Because when I talk to you, the next time, if you ask me the same question, I broadly give you the same answer because it's based on certain principle. But with ChatGPT, if I say something, if I prompt in a different way, it might give you a very different sort of answers because it is totally probabilistic, and it is a learned rules and based on relationship and relevance. So it's no really assigned roles or principles behind it.
So you said something very interesting a moment ago. I think this is what you said, that there are going to be times where through the use of ChatGPT, the outcome might include, let's say, components of content that the originator of the question themselves did not contemplate. In fact, it's a superior outcome, right? And so the contemplator of the question might be startled by just how good the response was, and think that this is something beyond normal human intelligence, when in fact, I think what you're also saying is that because the system has access to everything that's on the World Wide Web, it can comb through, okay, and pull
That's
out.
correct.
Okay, so really the key then, it sounds like, is as long as the human can contemplate the questions, right, and has
Yeah.
access to this mind-numbing computer power up in the cloud, it can perform these predictive analytics that enable it to pull out the superior outcome. Does that make any sense?
Yes, it does. But as the old saying go, garbage in, garbage out, right? So what happened is, so far when they train the program, you're using all the information from the web, and we choose the information and screen out the one that is the incorrect information or bias and so on, to the best of our abilities. But going forward, people potentially can exploit that and feed in a lot of misinformation, and they wouldn't be able to distinguish it, because it has no principles behind it. It just collect what it is and then synthesize it and summarize it. So in a sense, on one hand, that we going forward, people can game the system by feeding in all this information, and on the other hand, a lot of us also realize that the data we put in for free is being used and being monetized by this organization. So now going forward, the data side would be more tricky, because each of us there will be mechanism coming through where each of us want to protect our own personal data. For example, using the crypto wallet or this kind of mechanism, so that we don't give this value for free to the big organization. So going forward, there will be a different type of dynamics, I believe. But the thing is, the cumulative knowledge so far is already there. So it's just an incremental addition to this. But given how fast things are moving, so we are continuously training and receiving new information. So it is still, to me, uncertain how it might evolve. It could be, as many commentators said, the disinformation and actually generating very dangerous thing as well.
Yes. And so, Gary, thank you very much for this high-level perspective on artificial intelligence, machine learning, and nowcasting. And I think what our audience would be very interested in at this point are your views, your perspectives, your insights on how their businesses might be affected by this, and how they might be able to apply these tools, because these are tools and techniques, right, to basically advance a particular agenda. And I think, as you know, on the phone, we have professional money managers, we have accountants, lawyers, brokerage firms, this type of group. So how do you see these tools and techniques being successfully applied in those areas? And I realize we're covering a lot of different territory here, but please give us your thoughts.
Yeah, thank you. This is actually one crucial thing I did mention before about AI is setting objectives, because that is relevant to this question. Okay. So basically, when we train the AI, we give them objectives, right? So the question is, this area is very problematic. You have it is very easy to have a literal specification of an objective without achieving the intended outcomes. The ancient Greek myth about King Midas, that everything he touches will turn to gold.
Yes.
That includes his food and his drink as well. So, and that is the problem there, because when you and I set the objectives, we have a lot of common background and understanding behind us. You wouldn't think of even if I think outside the box, it wouldn't be, it is not, it is, in a way, it's within reason. Whereas an AI, when you set the objectives, it could go totally off the targets because it still still achieve the objectives, for example. And a good example would be quite a few years back, the chess algorithm, right? So it beats the grandmaster because it can see other routes that no human can see. But these are very confined objectives. So, but using AI, when we set objectives that say, okay, you like to perform this, when you and I talk to another human, we kind of know the parameters. But
Yes.
AI are not human, and they're different species.
So
they do
Gary,
not
this
know.
sounds like this is reminiscent. I know you're a Star Trek fan, but this reminds me, I think it was of HAL 9000 on Space Odyssey 2001, right? So that computer was not designed for the specifications it ultimately carried out, correct? Would that be an example?
Right. Exactly. Just like yesterday, the CNN news in one of the summits in Asia, the military was talking about the drone. So they have a certain objective to destroy the enemies in a simulation, not the real thing.
Yes.
That when the operator say countermount the objective, to say, look, do not kill, the AI still try to achieve its objective. So this decision is to kill the operator. And so we say, so because you're on the way to achieving objectives. So when they quickly program it, they no, do not kill your own side. The next decision it makes is to destroy the communication tower so that it cannot receive the latest instructions from that particular operator. So you can see the objective setting is there, but there's no kind of common assumption and understanding behind the whole body of common assumptions and understanding is lacking.
So does that mean, Gary, that what's critical here is that the questions be formulated properly, right? You have to anticipate the parameters when you're posing the question.
Exactly. So, but this is actually a very difficult task.
Yeah.
To define the objective clearly with all the potential way that it can be off track is actually a very hard task. And in fact, it will get worse because recently Google made another term called misgeneralization. Because as a system capability keep improving, it can generalize successfully the capabilities. But on the other hand, its goals does not generalize as desired. So the system will competently pursue the wrong goal.
So I can see right here, Gary, you've come up with a great new profession. And I kid you not. In the future, right, you're going to have people that are properly trained to formulate these commands, whether it be for military systems or financial systems. It will be critical.
Well, actually, it's a very old profession. In the ancient Greek, is the guy who interpret the oracle, right? So they ask the oracle the questions and they interpret it. Or the priest from temples or so on. It is exactly this, except that and it is exactly that, because it is when we're setting the objectives, we have to be very, very careful, because even it works now, when we upgrade the AI for the next version, the AI might actually generate a new path. So it could be exploiting a new choice, which from our point of view is a very poor choice of what it is rewarded for. But from the AI's point of view, it is a more efficient way to achieve that.
So is this something that a business analyst on a trading desk might do if the trading desk was using artificial intelligence and machine learning? Right.
Exactly. Going back to the question. So at the moment, I would say there are if the practical side is more on the restricted use of AI, meaning that you actually have a closed system. One of the use case would be, for example, I introduced some neural net technology to some investment banks. And the way we use it is to replicate heavy computation intensive Monte Carlo simulations.
Okay.
So instead of taking, let's say 5 hours to run big simulations and repeat the regulatory calculations, we use the neural net to replicate the pricing functions. And the neural net, of course, is just a bunch of nodes with weights. So the computation is very quick. So you can actually accomplish the task in a fraction of a second instead of 5 hours. But the neural net itself has no modeling, because when you do the Monte Carlo simulations, you have a lot of understanding about the risk factors using stochastic calculus, how to optimize and how to calibrate to the market. The neural net has none of that. It just faithfully replicates the pricing functions within the scope. So This is a closed system. So within the scope, the boundary of the pricing system, it wouldn't make these new decisions, right? So when you train it. So when you have, if you deploy AI basically as an optimization tools that incorporate new patterns and nonlinear factors and so on, which would be superior to human decision, but then it is a relatively closed system, so you can still derive a lot of benefits from using that. Yes. Without the risk of misspecifying the objectives or getting unintended consequences.
So Gary, given everything you've just described, and this is a lot of, from my standpoint, deep content, right? Going back to how money managers, lawyers, accountants, broker-dealers can take advantage of this. Let me approach the question from a slightly different angle. What types of skill sets and let's say educational backgrounds should people who are either preparing to enter the workforce or who want to, let's say, update their skills and knowledge bases to play more meaningful roles, what would you advise them to be doing? What should organizations, how should organizations be hiring and, let's say, retraining people for this new challenge?
Okay. Now, if I move back one step, you say that AI doesn't make you money. Doesn't make the money for your business.
Yes.
Your business makes the money. So the focus is always on the business side. So we focus traditionally on the so-called KPIs, the key objective. So it will be for example, the business model for generating your revenue, how to de-risk your operation, about cost saving and efficiencies, and the decision quality, the quality of information for your decision.
Yes.
So-called information asymmetry and timing advantage. Information asymmetry is that I know much more than you because I can join the dots from a lot of this information, and timing advantage because I know it 30 seconds before you do, or 1 day before you do.
Yes.
So we were focusing on the business side. Is always, but now we have to think of a lot of the existing so-called old assumptions, because now the new technology can give you a new route to do certain things, right? So, for example, the AI strength will be collecting vast amount of information and summarizing and highlighting them, and to generate highly relevant related topics. So when we keep sitting in front of a terminal and see Bloomberg News, Reuters News, and everything, it is very hard for human to keep joining the dots. We just get the partial pictures. Whereas an AI that collect a lot of this information and summarize them and highlight the certain criteria that you specify for will be much more efficient. For example, recently KPMG has used the technology behind ChatGPT to create a system based on its own data to help advise the staff on M&A. or you can use the technology to sift through the sell-side research, earning transcript, and pitch decks to extract and condense key points into clear and concise briefings, or to compare the investment targets based on measures such as web traffic and news users, and to isolate those with the biggest growth potentials. So these are the pattern recognition that has a strength of AI, that we can collect a vast amount of information and have pattern recognitions. So that would be and applying this strength to the KPIs, i.e. the business model for generating revenue, how to de-risk operations, the cost savings, efficiencies, and the quality of the decision making. If we focus on the applications on this, then that is when it can potentially make you go ahead of your competitors.
Interesting. Very interesting, Gary. So where do you see this trending? Okay, so it already sounds like investment banks, money management firms are already using many of these artificial intelligence, machine learning tools, okay? And maybe not so effectively, okay? At least not yet. Where do you see the trend heading, or the trend heading, rather?
Yeah, there are separate areas, because a bank is a big entity. So one area would be trading and risk management. If you think about the investment banking side, you have multiple data sources, and you have sophisticated analytics, risk models, and so on. And you generate a lot of metrics, and you generate the dashboards for decision making, and finally the actions. So it is a long chain of complex, manual intensive, and siloed process, right? So people try to automate them, but of course, it's a lot of skill and judgment and decision making embedded in this long chain of complex and manual intensive process. So before the automation, you can only achieve it, for example, e-trading. You simplify the process, and you can do that. But now with AI strength, with pattern recognitions and collecting lots of information, you can now see that, okay, this is the area. You have a lot of target areas for optimization, digitalizations, and automation. So this is one area for trading and risk management. For example, credit risk. We have a traditional credit risk model or counterparty credit risk. We have certain criteria to judge it. But now with all this new information coming through all the time, and then you start joining the dots. And so potentially you have a much more responsive way to look at your risk positions and the credit risk or counterparty credit risk. You can have a much faster response and update, for example. Similarly for trading, people have been trying to use it for trading, and mostly it's on the data side, the trading data, looking for patterns, time series analysis, and so on. And people start using sentiment. But of course, the sentiment itself is too noisy. It's just like in the old days, we walk into a market, we hear everybody talk about something. Yes. We don't know what is true and what's not true, and so on. So I think the way to use it in incorporate this sentiment analysis into risk models, the risk factors, and channel those into relevant risk factors and start scoring them. And so you put it in a Bayesian framework, basically, that you keep updating your decision in the so-called Nowcasting framework to keep changing your point of view about your odds of doing certain trades. So this will be the two areas where I think it is people will focus a lot on now. This is one area. The other area is on, let's say, operations, because it is all the bank spend so much time on maintenance and so on, because it's vast amount of operational data being generated. And then you may, if something goes wrong, you require on the human skill and try to look for what's gone wrong, try to debug it, and so on. So there's a new field called AI ops or ML ops, machine learning ops, is to collect all these data and actually analyze them and come up with looking at the pattern and come up with the decision to help to guide you which area is going wrong. So it subtly shift from operational base. So you have a set of rules. This is what you follow. If something gone wrong, then you look at this, to risk based. So you can actually, because when you're looking for patterns, it is one way is to look for the rules. One way is to look at the risk from these patterns. So you can actually subtly start shifting to risk-based analytics from the AI or machine learning code to sort out the risk. For example, post-trade reconciliations, or trade mismatch, or some operations that generate certain data, but it's actually in contradiction to some other areas. So, which is not easy to be noticed by human when it's terabytes of data,
Yes.
but the machine will be able to pick that up and highlight it.
But again, the
these are
machine
the
won't be
two
able to pick
areas.
it up unless the machine is instructed to look for these particular circumstances. So does it also stand to reason then that the people that will be most valuable in this endeavor, okay, will be people who can think in very clear and precise terms, right? So the freewheeler is going to be less, the big picture person is going to be less, let's say, applicable. I'm not going to say not valuable, but less applicable in this situation, which kind of to me suggests that folks like accountants and lawyers who are trained, I think, to think in very precise terms, right?
Yes.
Among others, and folks that have, let's say, backgrounds in statistics, statistical analysis, predictive analytics. Once again, these people will be more valuable than ever before, because now not only will their skills of precision thinking be valued, but they're going to be attached to these supercomputers, right? These, well, like we said before with ChatGPT, right? ChatGPT is an effective tool if it's because it can query the entire database of the World Wide Web, right? But it has to be in the hands of someone who can ask the right questions.
Yes, it is true. My analogy is probably not that appropriate. Is Excel spreadsheet. The value of the Excel spreadsheet.
I was thinking the same thing, because it's funny with Excel, right? I've always thought to myself, if you had an MBA, let's say that, or a CPA, right, and you're working with Excel, Excel contain, if you understand the definitions, okay, within Excel, you're really powerful, right? Because you can do the work. It reminds me of when I came into business. We were using lead pencils with green columnar pads, okay, and calculators. Now we don't do that.
Yes.
Now we have these extraordinary tools like Excel, and now this ChatGPT, and artificial intelligence and machine learning, which will put at our disposal, the disposal of humans, enormous power, not just from the standpoint of crunching, but to help us make decisions, right? Because it's a giant decision tree framework, isn't it?
Exactly. It is. Yeah, I agree with you. This is what effectively, that's what it is. You have a good quality information to enhance your decision making. But then it goes back to my earlier point: is the business that makes you money.
Right.
So people need to understand the business potential before you can deploy these huge weapons to make good use of it.
Yes.
So it is that's why I think of the Excel spreadsheet is people who understand not just the technical side of Excel, but also the business side. This is why the analysts use the Excel, right? That is the most valuable.
Exactly. And so let me just ask a follow-up question. And I think a lot of what you've said really suggests this question, which is to say, there's a lot of, it seems to me at least, tremendous disconnect going on between, let's say, a lot of the IT infrastructure projects and the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning tools and techniques. What are
Yeah.
your thoughts on this, Gary?
Yeah, that's a very good question. Well, the whole point is that AI and machine learning are not software development. It is not, because first of all, the important thing is garbage in, garbage out. So it's data centric. So the data become extremely important on this sort of applications. The data quality, the structures, and how you maintain it going forward is front and center of the AI development. Whereas the software development is the software side that is the important thing, and it is always deterministic. You want that what the income, the input is that, so you want this particular outcome, right? AI, in a way, first of all, is data centric. Secondly, it's a moving goalpost, because 3 years ago, we wouldn't be talking about inflation. And 3 years later, we might not be talking about inflations either. It's a different type of topics keep coming up, right? So in this sense, it's a moving goalpost, because the input, the shifting, the objective will be shifting. You have changing technologies, and then you also have the regulatory demand. For example, it will be new buyers. There's suddenly some other things come up which actually need to you need to rethink some of the training method or the data you use. And also once you have, so because of the moving goalpost, you have to have a continuously performance monitor.
Okay.
In this sense, it's rather like human. You have a manager who you can actually always have to supervise the person, because you cannot let it keep going on its own, unlike the software, because of the moving goalposts. So the bias, the fit for purpose checks, and the control and governance. So the whole structures and the center of gravity of an AI development is very different from software development. So if you have this mind, that's why when you have the mindset to say, oh, it's technology, we put it to IT and so on, that become a big mismatch, because of course IT also require data, but it's a very different mindset. For example, once I heard about data securities, about being hacking.
Yes.
The mindset of the hackers are not IT. The mindset of the hackers are guerrilla fighters. So you cannot use if you want to have a good security IT operation, you do not think like an IT manager. You need to think like a guerrilla warriors.
Yes.
So it is a very different mindset to do that. So similarly for AI applications within the IT infrastructures, it's a very different mindset, and you require different type of resource allocations, center of gravities, and a different type of operation and control to the IT. So in a way, it is not surprising that many AI projects fail, because first of all, it's a different mindset and development. And secondly, if you want to impose AI onto existing infrastructure, because most companies have already existing infrastructure, then it become a big mismatch. So you actually need to have a good plan to see how do you start integrating it, so your left hand and right hand can coordinate, not like the AI and the IT infrastructure are two separate way, and then they clash with each other.
So Gary, let me ask a follow-up question. I mean, this is all very, very interesting. I'll give you what I consider to be a real life example. You talked about operational risk before, okay? And that becoming very important in the context of artificial intelligence and machine learning as applications for that. Many of the systems that Wall Street runs on right now are what we would call legacy systems. They were written back in the 70s, the 80s, COBOL, Fortran as the foundation, okay? And it's very hard to write, in a world with Microsoft.NET, SQL Server, ASAP front ends, okay? There's a misalignment between that technology, that contemporary modern technology, and the legacy technology. Okay. And I think you're sort of heading in this direction. How do you transform, or can you transform legacy technology to work with this new technology, the artificial intelligence, or can artificial intelligence and machine learning be used as tools to update legacy technology? Do you see what I'm saying?
Okay, yes, it is a very interesting thought. Yes. Yes, I think in a way there are several steps because obviously I think many people suggest a certain way to go approach this. And then when I look at the suggestions and I compare them to those suggestions 20 years ago, they're actually almost identical. You know, you have a data ownership, you have to this, you have
Yes.
to have clear diagrams. So what did it go wrong? Is that because it is to me it is because system also evolve constantly with different change requests and demands, and the way we run it is become so complicated and in a black box, like a black box. It become impossible to change. Right? So
Yes.
if you actually put AI on top of a black box with lots of data passing through, you're asking for trouble. So one of the technology I like to, I think it has a potential is called graph, the
What
graph
is it?
technology. A
Graph?
graph. Yes, just so basically when you see a graph, basically it's a kind of like a graph giving you the lots of nodes and the connections. So
Yes.
it's like a process map in a way. Right? So the graph tell you the story of what one part, how is it connect to the other parts, what links are between them, and which function of each node is doing what. Now, because of what I mentioned before as a moving goalpost, if we actually start building a new infrastructure, perhaps in 5 years' time, it might be out of date already, and it will not fit for purpose. So that become a very hard decision. How do I upgrade this? So that's why I think graph has a potential because it gives you intermediate steps. It's a little bit like in the old days when we use Linux and
Yes.
Microsoft. We type in commands, and then Apple's come up with a graphic interface to drag things around, right? So when you can visualize a lot of the process,
Yes.
let's say we don't want to totally change the legacy process, but first we visualize it first. We wrap the graph around the existing functions.
Yes.
So now you have a better understanding on the connections and hidden connections and how things are moved together. Rather than the lots of programs, you actually have visualized it through a graph. And then now you can start responding in a more flexible way because you have a much better visibility on the process and the data being used within your process.
So
I
are you
think,
saying, Gary, that you could let's say the legacy software, it's based
yeah,
on a flat file format, okay?
yes,
Whereas the modern, the more contemporary software is architecturally a relational database where each object is separate and distinct, right? Through the application of artificial intelligence and machine learning, can you bridge those two? And in other words, to the point where I'll use this word, it actually heals or transforms, upgrades through some intermediary step, the flat file, so that it can
right.
speak to the object-oriented nature of a relational database. Does that question make any sense?
Yes, it makes perfect sense. It is a little bit, to me, is probably still not quite achievable yet.
Okay.
What I'm actually, but it would be there very soon because when you ask ChatGPT, you can write programs for you now.
Yes.
So why do I learn C++? Why do I need to learn the Python? Because
Yes.
in 2 or 3 years' time, I can ask if I learn how to interact with ChatGPT, it can write whatever programming language I ask
Yes.
it to write, right? So this, in certain way, it is that. But what I want to propose is the intermediate step, which is to use the graph to understand your existing operation in a much more visualized way.
And graph
And
is
then you
what?
can
So,
start
so graph
putting
is graph free software on the internet? What is graph?
Yes, it's a tools which basically, more specifically, is a graph computing tools, which basically wrap your individual functions into separate nodes, and it show the relationship, because let's say function A calling function B, C, and D, and function Z. The graph will show the a node which is function A, which will call the other node which is function B, C, and D, and Z. So you see all these arrow and edges between the nodes. So you have a visualization of your process, how it works when you go through the whole process. So now you have the visibility. That means that you can actually have a much more flexible reaction when external requirements change. It's much easier for you to actually make the change,
Yes.
rather than the whole big block system, a flat file structure. For example, you need to know exactly line 1358 needs to be changed. Then you require the it is much harder for human.
Whereas, so I can
uh,
only imagine the application that these tools and techniques will have in the world of medical science. I mean, we're talking about financial services right now, but I can only imagine, right, in terms of let's say illnesses related to DNA, et cetera, et cetera. The computing.
Exactly. Exactly. The very practical one is one of my friend, Jamil Mayet, is a professor in Imperial College. They recently used AI to look at all the patients that have been admitted to cardiology units.
Yes.
And now they can predict with 95% accuracy the mortality rate, the chance that you will die within 30 days when you're being admitted. 95% accuracy. So, well, it's not for the sake of prediction, because it is like, what is the follow-up? If that person have a good chance of recovering, then you need to do further tests. You can commit resource to it. If that person is 95%, that it is more or less very good chance it will die, then you have a different type of treatment. The way you communicate to family, the way you commit the resource to the limited resource. So that is a very hard decision for human.
Yes.
But with the AI, you actually, first of all, you take in a lot more other factors into consideration, and then you can generate a more reliable pictures, rather than just looking at patient and do a quick rapid test on few areas. You can see a lot more. And secondly, so these are the practical things that will be coming to us with the next few years. Another thing, for example, will be the good old-fashioned stethoscope, where the doctor listens to your chest. Yeah,
yes,
that's right. With the human ear, we can only hear so much. With the AI, we can actually derive much more information about the health of the heart valve or the artery health and so on. So, for example, if you can do that, you can actually roll it out in a much bigger scale. For example, when you go to pharmacy and get your paracetamol, you can do a quick check. You don't need the expertise of a doctor for the initial screening, for example. Or you go to optician, you check your eyes, and then AI would actually look at the image and say, well, is there risk of diabetes? Is there other risks of some other things? So it is all coming within the next few years. It's well within the capability now. It's more going through the regulations and trial run and so on and so on the medical field, it will be amazing within the next 5 to 10 years.
And Gary, what nations at this point do you think are poised for leadership in the artificial intelligence, machine learning, nowcasting space?
Wow, it is. This is a very big question, and to be honest, I think there are two driving factors behind this. One is the motivation behind it. You have multiple motivations. For example, in US, you don't have an organized way to do that, but you have in a way, parallel processing. You trial and error in many different ways. So it helps you to find the right path, much easier.
Okay.
On the other side is the resource issue, because certain way you need to put in a lot of resource before you can move to the next step. Let's say. So
Yes.
in this sense, both you need a balance for both sides. So as you say, which nations, it's all depending on the culture as well as the resource commitment for different nations to see how it comes up. Because in this sense, for example, I will mention China and India, because they have a huge populations, but on the other hand, the way they direct the resource are very different from US. So it is so in a certain area, you can see that they can mobilize the resource and it can
Yes.
advance very quickly. On other areas, you can see that maybe they don't have such a diversity of thoughts and different motivations to try out different things. So maybe, so it is very hard to say, but for sure, when we look at the COVID, for example,
Yes.
when people pull together resource and the diversity, you come up with solution very quickly.
Oh,
So
yes.
this is the hope for all of us, that going forward, we would be able to cooperate more and actually advance a lot faster.
So, and that's a fascinating answer, Gary, and I think a very thoughtful one at that. So, Gary, in the remaining moments that we have, any closing thoughts here?
Yes.
Please, by
Well,
all
thank
means.
you. Yeah, I think it just really, because we talk so much about AI, but
Yes.
it is I think when the Ukraine war started, I hear certain commentators say the armchair general would sit down and talk about strategy. The real guy who actually doing the operations to talk about the operational details. So AI, in a way, we can talk a lot of amazing things around here. The question is, how do you use it with your business to make money? And that is the practical side of this. And you should focus on your business side, which area can be the most targeted, would give the most benefits, and what is the strength and AI, what is the details, how can you actually use it to do that? In a way, it always is, as always, for production use, the devil is in the details. So it is really how you put things together that makes it work, that counts. So that's why so many AI project fails, because big word general statements and putting resource in the wrong place and not knowing how you direct this, you have it's just like a lottery. You might be lucky, you might not.
Yes, and you might not be.
So
Well,
yeah, that's my thoughts.
unfortunately, our time is up. And I do want to
Right.
thank you, Gary Wong of Artemis AG, for really sharing some fascinating insights
Thank
into
you.
this brave new world of artificial intelligence, machine learning, and nowcasting.